Hi, I'm Erica, a mom, wife, and caregiver. I have been through the highs and lows of having a child with a medically complex background and special needs, all caused by epilepsy. I'm here to let you know you're not alone. There are so many resources out there, and that you too can and will come out on the other side stronger and more resilient than you ever imagined. It's not always easy, but I'm here for you. Welcome to the Parenting Epilepsy and Special Needs podcast. I think back to the days and months following our daughter's right hemispherectomy surgery. I want to give that woman, her husband, and her kids huge, huge hugs because they did it. They survived what might be one of, and hopefully the hardest period of their lives. But when you are in it and in the thick of it, at least from my perspective as the mom of the family, you do not necessarily see it that way because you are so focused on living minute by minute and day by day and surviving to get to the other side. You are looking for the wins, appreciating every basic milestone achieved, and praying through those challenging moments that do arise. We knew that our daughter would be in the hospital for roughly at least 1, maybe 2 weeks post her hemispherectomy surgery, since she would have a drain. And for those of you who are not aware, the purpose of the drain is to remove the excess cerebral spinal fluid and blood from the brain cavities after surgery. It also controls the intracranial pressure, prevents fluid buildup, and lowers the risk of fever and infection. And if you are like me, despite being a medical mom of a complex medical child, I get nauseous just thinking about that. So it's okay if that happens to you too, because we're all human. I'm getting better, but it's still tough for me. Then finally, getting back to our story, after her first 1 to 2 weeks of the inpatient stay, she would transfer to the local rehab hospital for another inpatient stay there, and that would last about 5 to 6 weeks. And I think for us, it was about 5 weeks. I stayed inpatient with her. It was not easy being away from my husband and my other 2 daughters, who at that time were 11 and 9, but we knew how important it was going to be for our youngest daughter's recovery process. There is so much that you think about and consider when you're planning for a surgery of this nature for your child. It will change your child and your family's life. So, in many cases, parents will take the time prior to the surgery to get multiple second opinions before making a decision to go through with something like this. I will say this multiple times throughout this episode. Every child is different. They all have different outcomes and abilities after surgery. All of our brains are different. And no matter how many doctors you talk to, they can only give you the facts and potential risks of, or basically on, what to expect from a medical standpoint based on your child's specific condition, type of epilepsy, and what they have seen occur, that being the doctors, with other patients. But there are so many things that they will not be able to tell you. Because again, every child is different. And let's be honest, most neurosurgeons do not spend their everyday home life day in and day out with their hemispherectomy surgery patients. So what they see and hear during appointments is only a snippet of the actual day to day. And that itself even varies by child. Okay, take a deep breath. Here we go. I will say that I had to go back as I was planning for this episode and look at photos of this traumatic time in our life because my brain has blocked out certain memories and specific details of this time because it was pretty difficult, but we got through it. It's funny how that works, and I see it as your brain's way of kind of protecting you and helping you move on. I will never forget walking into the PICU to see our daughter after her hemispherectomy. She was still coming out of anesthesia and on strong pain meds. I remember feeling hopeful that we would never see another seizure ever again, but yet nervous of what her recovery and post surgery self was going to look like. She ultimately did wake up and seem relieved to see my husband and I, and did recognize us, something that we were very, very worried about, despite our daughter's surgeon reassuring us multiple times that she would recognize us. However, she did not smile at first. She did not talk, which that in itself was pretty terrifying. And she slept a lot, which, thinking back, was to be expected after such a huge surgery. By the following day, she gave us a half smile, and the medical team began working on simple things such as sitting up with the support of the nurses and physical therapist, and then also turning her head left and right. This simple movement that we take for granted every day was so hard for her. She was crying out in pain, and it was so difficult as her parents to watch this. But we were so proud of her for working so hard and giving it her all. Then later that day, my husband and I were so relieved we got to hold her in our arms with supports and pillows and blankets around us to keep her comfortable while sitting in a chair. Keep in mind, she was only 4 years old. So at that time, it was a pretty easy task for us to do. By day 3, post surgery, she was eating, fed herself with a spoon, and was drinking water from a sippy cup. She may have done this the day before, but again, I am going off of photos that I had to look back at because I don't remember the exact details. Best of all, by day 3, we felt comfortable doing a FaceTime call on our phone with her 2 older sisters, who, as I mentioned, were 11 and 9 at that time. And guess what? She began talking once she saw them. She just needed to see her best friends, her sisters. She said hi. She told them she missed them. And I still cannot watch this video of her and her sisters talking to each other without bawling my eyes out. It is the sweetest thing I have ever seen. The days that followed were filled with highs and lows. I can recall feeling that after the first few days, it was a literal roller coaster. One day was great. The next day was rough. Some days she slept more. Other days she had more energy and was awake. And PT was challenging. And it did cause pain and discomfort the entire time that we were inpatient in the hospital. We began seeing more smiles from her about 6 or 7 days after surgery when she had the energy to do things that she enjoyed, such as playing games on her iPad and drawing on her whiteboard. I did want to mention for those who are considering this surgery, her smile was, I guess the best way to describe it was like slightly slanted or sideways. Um, this is normal because of the impact to the part of the brain that controls facial movements. So for our girl, this improved, and she is now able to do a full smile, and you would never know that anything happened in regard to this area of her brain. By days 9 and 10, we were able to take her outside of the hospital room to walk around the floor that we were on. It was so nice to get her out of bed and out into the hallways to move around and have a change of scenery specifically for her and to be with her. From looking at the photos, it looks like her drain was removed on days 11 or 12. And again, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, that for every child, that can even change. It just depends on how their brain responds. She was ready to be transferred to the rehab hospital nearby, but we had to wait an extra, I think it was like 2 or 3 days before a room was available on the pediatric floor. So she continued to receive care and therapies from the hospital. And then on day 14, she came down with a fever and was vomiting. So this was pretty scary because this can mean a lot of different things. And it can also just be how her body is responding. She was doing so well, and this kind of caught us off guard. Her doctors ran tests and more scans, and she did not have an infection or it didn't show hydrocephalus. So it just seemed to be a part of her body's recovery journey. I was just personally thankful that we were still inpatient in the hospital and under the care of her medical team when this did happen. So finally, day 15 arrived, and she and I were transported by a non emergency ambulance to the rehab hospital down the street from our daughter's children's hospital. I had so many emotions and thoughts running through my head on that day that, I mean, what was this going to look like? How would she do during therapy? Would the pain go away soon? And many, many other thoughts. I remember my husband bringing all of our belongings in our suitcases and her toys up to our room. He transported all of this by our car and met us there. And then we said our goodbyes, and he went home to relieve our family and sitters who had been staying with our other girls during this time while we were in the hospital for their surgery and then the surgery recovery. So inpatient rehab was pretty tough at first. Our daughter was still very weak and in pain. When I was looking back at the photos and even in my memories, I can remember this. There were a few habits or behaviors that I saw that for some of them I had completely forgotten about because they stopped within a few weeks or months, and in some cases, even a few days. So one habit was, and I'm guessing she would cover her right eye with her hand, with her right hand. I'm guessing that this was her way of helping herself see visually at first, as she now had a hemianopia and could only see out of half of the visual field of each eye. The other thing that I forgot about was the intense impulsivity. I remember sitting in our inpatient rehab hospital room with her during a meal after a long day of therapy and quickly realizing that I could only have, say, one food bowl or one plate on the table or wherever she was eating in front of her. All the other items might end up on the floor or thrown across the room. So I quickly adapted to that. Thankfully, as I mentioned, that passed very quickly because I would talk her through just repetitively why we don't do that. We eat one plate at a time, and then, just talk her through when we're all done. Tell me, and I'll give you, say, if she had pasta in one bowl, fruit in another bowl, and maybe vegetables in another bowl, I would give them to her individually to avoid the impulse to just throw it. After just a few short days of therapy, probably about 3 days in, the exercises became less painful and she didn't cry as much during therapy, which was such a relief to see. In fact, it was really amazing to see her progress and her endurance increase a little each day and week by week. By week 7, the final week of our inpatient therapy, Katie had a seizure. I was devastated. I can picture this like it was yesterday. I remember calling my husband, and I could barely get the words out of my mouth that she had had a seizure because I was crying so hard. I remember telling myself that entire day that the brain surgeon did warn us that seizures can happen as whether it's the day after surgery or the weeks after as the brain heals. But why? Why did this happen? That's all I could think. We just went through so much and made so many gains. We were crushed, but we were determined to remain positive and keep moving forward. And this, quite honestly, was just the beginning of the resilience and strength that we built and continue to carry with us as a family. On March 13th, 2018, we finally got to go home. After 7 long weeks, we made it. We got through it, and it was time to return home. But we also had to start a new life. Life was not going to be the same, and it took time, patience, and a lot of adjusting to get back to what was our new form of normal. When we arrived home, Katie, our daughter, was now almost 2 months post surgery. We quickly transitioned to an intense therapy regimen. It was 3 days per week at a local outpatient rehab hospital where she received PT, OT, and speech. She continued to make gains, but her seizures did continue to return, so the progress varied as a result. She was so close to walking again because she did walk prior to surgery, but just couldn't quite get her balance back as the seizures that were once happening monthly. So she had one while we were inpatient in inpatient rehab, and then a month after that. And then I believe after that month, then they started coming back like weekly. So ultimately, fast forward a few weeks, and we're now back to having seizures every few days as we were prior to the surgery. It became clear that our battle with epilepsy was not over. We did still, and I do think it's important to mention this, we did still see some gains after the surgery. Her speech improved. I guess the best way to say it is like cognitive abilities. And even though she was having seizures, different concepts as she was learning, that got better. Those are just two of the few things that jump out at me. But Katie is still attending regular OT, PT, and speech, and she also gets services therapies through school. She utilizes a manual wheelchair to get around and has AFOs on both of her feet. I want to end this episode by mentioning something that is so incredibly important, especially if you are on this journey right now or you're trying to decide to move forward with this surgery. I know this is probably on your mind, and so I'm just going to put it out there. The answer is no. We do not regret doing the surgery, and I'll explain why. As with everything that we have tried, we put in the time, research, second opinions, and discussions with other families and doctors to hear their experience on what worked and or what their outcome was. Our daughter qualified as a candidate for this surgery. And as difficult as a decision that this was, my husband and I both got to a point where we agreed that if we never did it, we would never know if that was the one solution or decision that could have been our answer to help either reduce or improve her seizures. So, as a parent of a child with epilepsy and complex medical needs, at least for us, our perspective changed. Your goal becomes to give them every opportunity to have the best quality of life and hopefully with the least amount of pain, at least for us, that was our thoughts. Our daughter, I mean, again, when she had this surgery, she was 4. She is now 13. And despite the challenges and obstacles that epilepsy has given her, we are blown away by everything that she has done and that she continues to work toward. I mean, we are, as a family, different people because of what we have been through. And I mean this in a positive way. I still sometimes can't believe that God chose me as her mom, but I love her so, so much, and I would do anything for her, and will continue to advocate for her and seek out other treatments and options to help better control and manage her seizures. We did it. That was a tough one, but thank you. Thank you for joining me today during this pretty vulnerable episode. I think it's so important to be honest about our experience, as I hope that can help other families as they're on this journey. So, again, thank you for joining. Please share this with someone who could benefit from hearing this episode. Don't forget to write a review or rate this episode. It means the world to me, but it also helps get this show out to others who need to hear this information. You can also follow me on Instagram at parenting epilepsy _ special needs. I'll see you on the next episode.